King Charles made a decision that left Queen Camilla completely speechless, and within moments, everyone inside Buckingham Palace realized something extraordinary was unfolding. This was no ordinary royal announcement. Behind the palace walls, quiet preparations had already begun for a decision that would send shockwaves through the royal household. One question echoed through every corridor. What could possibly have happened for the king to authorize the transfer of Queen Camilla's official state duties? Emergency meetings were called, confidential documents moved rapidly between senior offices, and the tension inside the palace became impossible to ignore. Few believed the decision would take effect so quickly, but once the final order was confirmed, the atmosphere at Buckingham Palace changed completely. All eyes were now on King Charles because everyone understood this was no longer a routine administrative matter, it had become a question of trust at the very heart of the monarchy. Before we reveal what really happened behind the palace doors, be sure to subscribe to Regal Signal for the latest royal family updates, exclusive palace stories, and the moments the headlines often miss. By the following morning, Buckingham Palace appeared calm on the surface, but the unusual activity outside King Charles' private office suggested that something far more serious was unfolding behind closed doors. Within minutes, a confidential folder was placed on the king's desk. The room fell into complete silence as he began reading every page with remarkable care. As Charles reached the final page, his expression changed. No one spoke, yet everyone present sensed that the report contained something far more significant than a routine palace matter. Moments later, the king instructed his most trusted advisors to assemble immediately. What had begun as a private concern was now being treated as a highly sensitive issue for the royal household. During the meeting, one question dominated the discussion. If the situation was not addressed without delay, could it damage the public confidence and stability of the monarchy? That was the moment King Charles began considering a decision that could reshape the balance of responsibility within the royal family. A decision whose first and most immediate impact would fall on Queen Camilla. Yet no one in the room realized that another name had already begun appearing in the confidential plans, Princess Anne. Within hours, another unexpected development unfolded inside Buckingham Palace. Princess Anne was asked to return immediately, although she had not yet been told why. As she entered the private meeting room, a sealed confidential folder was placed before her. Across the front, a single word stood out, immediate. Anne opened the folder and fell silent for a brief moment. Inside was a revised schedule containing a series of official engagements that had long been associated with Queen Camilla. At almost the same time, Queen Camilla received an urgent message from a senior palace official. After reading it twice, she asked only one question. Did King Charles personally approve this decision? The official replied without hesitation. Yes, Your Majesty. The room fell silent, and Camilla realized that this was no longer speculation. The decision had already been confirmed. Across the palace, it was not only the schedules that were changing. Staff assignments, private briefings, and official planning were already being reorganized to reflect the new arrangements. Yet the greatest shock was still to come, because King Charles had decided that the real reason behind this extraordinary transfer could no longer remain known to only a select few. King Charles now faced one unavoidable question. What had really happened to force such an extraordinary decision? Preparations for a major diplomatic ceremony were nearing completion when an unexpected change to the official seating plan was quietly discovered. It was far more than a minor alteration. Senior palace officials warned that the revised arrangement could affect royal protocol and the established order of precedence. When the king was presented with both the original documents and the revised version, he immediately realized that a decision had apparently been implemented in his name without his final approval. Everyone in the room understood that this was no longer about a seating plan. It had become a question of royal authority and trust within the palace itself. Rather than rushing to judgment, Charles gave a single instruction. I want the complete truth, no matter how difficult it may be. A formal internal review began at once, but as that review progressed, one name appeared repeatedly throughout the documents, and from that moment onward, Buckingham Palace would never feel quite the same again. As the internal review gathered pace, King Charles requested every relevant palace document, determined that the final decision would be based on facts rather than assumptions. 2. Each file was examined carefully. Official approvals, private notes, and ceremony arrangements were reviewed once again, and the overall picture gradually became much clearer. During the review, investigators uncovered a warning that had been issued before the ceremony. It stated clearly that the approved arrangements were not to be altered. After reading the warning, the king asked a single question. Was this instruction received by everyone concerned? The reply came immediately. Yes, Your Majesty. That answer changed the entire direction of the discussion. The issue was no longer whether a mistake had been made, but why the warning had apparently been disregarded. Silence filled the room before Charles finally spoke. When trust begins to weaken within the palace, he said quietly, it is not just one event that suffers, It is the monarchy itself. At that moment, the king decided to meet Queen Camilla and Princess Anne separately, setting the stage for one of the most significant private conversations inside Buckingham Palace. Later that evening, King Charles invited Princess Anne to a private meeting. Only the two of them were present, and no one else was permitted to enter the room. Looking directly at his sister, the king said quietly, "The responsibility I am placing before you today is not a reward. It is a duty required to protect the stability of the monarchy." Anne listened without interruption before replying calmly, "If this decision is in the service of the crown, I will carry out that duty to the very best of my ability." A short time later, Queen Camilla was invited into the same private room. The atmosphere was even more serious, as everyone understood that this conversation could shape the future of the royal household. Rather than beginning with accusations, King Charles placed the review documents on the table and said simply, "I want to understand exactly what happened." Camilla explained her position while the king listened carefully, interrupting only rarely. His expression made it clear that this was one of the most difficult decisions he had faced. As the meeting came to an end, King Charles reached for his pen to record his final decision, and at that very moment, a new chapter began inside Buckingham Palace. By the following morning, the moment everyone inside Buckingham Palace had been anticipating had finally arrived. King Charles' official order was ready to be issued. The document contained only a few carefully chosen words, yet their impact would be felt across the entire royal family. Queen Camilla's official state duties were to be transferred to Princess Anne. When the order reached Queen Camilla, she read it in complete silence. After a brief pause, she asked only one question: "Is this now the king's final decision?" 4. The palace official replied quietly, "Yes, Your Majesty. His Majesty has personally authorized every part of the order." The room fell silent once again. At the same time, Princess Anne received her revised program of royal engagements. She looked through the schedule before closing the folder. There was no sense of celebration, only a quiet acceptance of responsibility. Anne then said, "I am accepting these responsibilities not to replace anyone, but because I believe it is my duty to serve the crown during a difficult moment." Those words left the room in thoughtful silence. Yet the greatest challenge still lay ahead. Princess Anne was about to step into Queen Camilla's place at a major state occasion that would be watched by millions around the world. Everything was ready inside Buckingham Palace's grand ballroom. Diplomats, senior officials, and international guests had taken their seats, yet every eye remained fixed on a single entrance. For the first time, Princess Anne was about to carry out the official state duties that had recently been transferred from Queen Camilla. Everyone inside the palace understood that this was far more than a formal engagement, it was a defining moment. As Anne entered the hall, the atmosphere fell into complete silence. Cameras turned towards her, and every step she took was watched with intense attention. Elsewhere in the palace, Queen Camilla watched the live broadcast from a private room. Her expression remained composed, yet it reflected the weight of years spent building her public role. Reaching the podium, Princess Anne began her address. But her opening words surprised everyone in the room. She chose to begin with the same tribute Queen Camilla had originally prepared. Diplomats exchanged quiet glances. It was more than a speech. It was a statement that while responsibilities may change, the dignity of the crown must always come first. Yet as the ceremony came to an end, a private message reached King Charles, and what it revealed about Queen Camilla would shape the next chapter of this extraordinary story. As the ceremony came to an end, King Charles was handed a sealed personal envelope. Across the front were just a few words, "From Queen Camilla. Personal." He did not open it immediately. Instead, he held it in silence, almost as though he already sensed that its contents would test not only his judgment as king, but also his emotions as a husband. When Charles finally read the letter, the room fell quiet. There were no accusations, no expressions of anger, only Queen Camilla's honest reflections on everything that had happened. One sentence in particular stayed with him. "My hope has always been that the monarchy would matter more than any one individual, including me." Charles slowly folded the letter and looked out across the palace grounds. He realized this decision had reached far beyond official duties. It had touched the most personal part of his life. At that same moment, Princess Anne received a private note from the king containing just a few words. "Thank you for placing duty above all else." Yet one question remained unanswered. After everything that had happened, could King Charles and Queen Camilla rebuild the trust that had brought them to this moment? The following morning, another private meeting took place inside Buckingham Palace. This time, only King Charles and Queen Camilla were present. There were no advisors, no private secretaries, and no cameras. For several moments, neither of them spoke. At last, the king quietly said, "This decision was never an easy one, but the responsibilities of the crown must come before personal feelings." Camilla listened carefully before replying with calm dignity. "Whether I agree with your decision is another matter, but I understand that today you made it as king." Charles then admitted something he had not said publicly. The decision had affected not only Queen Camilla, it had weighed heavily on him as well. Before the meeting ended, Camilla made one final request. Please ask Princess Anne to continue supporting the charitable causes connected with these duties. That work must never stop. The king nodded quietly. In that moment, he recognized that despite her disappointment, Queen Camilla had chosen to place the interests of the crown above her personal feelings. By the following day, journalists had gathered outside Buckingham Palace. Every major broadcaster was asking the same question: why had King Charles made such a significant decision? The palace released only a brief official statement, explaining that the changes had been made to ensure the continuity of royal duties and the stability of the monarchy. Behind palace walls, however, the atmosphere was very different. Senior officials understood that this was no ordinary administrative adjustment, it had become a serious test of trust. Meanwhile, Princess Anne carried out her first official engagements with her usual sense of discipline, reminding those around her that service to the crown must always come before personal interests. Queen Camilla chose not to speak publicly. Instead, she remained silent, and for many observers that silence said more than any interview ever could. King Charles watched the public reaction with great care. He understood that people were no longer judging only his decision, they were judging the leadership of the monarchy itself. Yet one final decision still remained inside Buckingham Palace, and it would determine what Queen Camilla's future role within the royal family would look like. Several days later, another important meeting was held inside Buckingham Palace. This time, the purpose was not simply to review what had happened, but to decide the royal family's next course of action. King Charles carefully considered every report prepared by his senior advisors. Together, they pointed towards one clear conclusion. The monarchy now needed stability and public confidence above all else. After a long silence, the king spoke. The crown must always come before any individual, and every decision we make must reflect that principle. During the meeting, it was confirmed that Princess Anne would continue carrying out the official state duties that had been transferred to her, ensuring continuity and confidence in the royal household. Queen Camilla was informed of the decision in full. She offered no argument, saying only, "I sincerely hope every decision made today serves the best interests of the monarchy." King Charles nodded quietly. He understood that no outcome would satisfy everyone. But he believed his first responsibility would always be to the crown. Yet the most emotional chapter of this story was still to come, because one final private meeting between King Charles and Queen Camilla would determine how this extraordinary crisis would truly be remembered. That evening, King Charles and Queen Camilla met privately one final time. There were no official papers, no advisors, and no cameras. Only two people carrying the weight of one of the most difficult decisions of their lives. After a long silence, the king spoke quietly. "I did not make this decision to punish anyone. I made it because I believed it was necessary to protect public confidence in the crown." Camilla took a deep breath before replying. "I may never stop feeling the pain of this decision, but if it truly strengthens the monarchy, then I will accept that reality." Looking directly at her, Charles said, "Your place in my personal life has never changed, but my responsibilities as king required me to separate private relationships from official duty." The atmosphere in the room shifted. Both understood that some decisions are shaped not by emotion but by responsibility, and perhaps that is the greatest burden of wearing the crown. Before leaving, Camilla made one final request. "Please make sure the royal family always remains a family." Charles answered only with a quiet nod. Yet beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace, one question continued to echo. Had this decision truly strengthened the monarchy, or had it left a lasting fracture within the royal family? Inside Buckingham Palace, the final private meeting was about to begin. It was a conversation that many believed could define how this entire chapter of the royal family would ultimately be remembered. As the doors quietly closed, only King Charles and Queen Camilla remained in the room. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Breaking the silence, the king said softly, "Every decision I made was not as a husband, but as the sovereign entrusted with protecting the crown." Camilla took a slow breath before replying, "I understand that duty must come first, but some decisions leave a mark that remains long after the moment has passed." Charles offered no immediate response. Instead, he looked out across the palace grounds, reflecting on the years that had led them to this difficult moment. Finally, he spoke again. "History will remember the decision, but only we will ever understand the personal cost behind it." The room fell silent once more. Yet outside the palace walls, a new development was already beginning to unfold, and within hours, public reaction would take the story in an entirely unexpected direction. Over the following 24 hours, Buckingham Palace's official announcement dominated headlines around the world. News organizations, royal commentators, and the public all offered their own interpretations of the king's decision. Some viewed the decision as a necessary step to protect the stability of the monarchy, while others regarded it as one of the most emotionally challenging moments faced by the modern royal family. Princess Anne continued her new responsibilities with the quiet discipline for which she is widely respected, while Queen Camilla chose dignity and restraint rather than engaging in public debate. King Charles also avoided public argument, continuing to emphasize one principle above all else, that the strength of the monarchy lies in duty, stability, and service to the nation. As time passed, the headlines gradually faded, but the decision remained a reminder that the responsibilities of the crown can demand difficult choices beyond personal emotion. However history ultimately judges this chapter, it continues to highlight one enduring truth. The greatest challenge faced by any monarch is balancing personal relationships with the responsibilities of the crown. If you enjoy thoughtful documentaries and in-depth stories about the British royal family, subscribe to Regal Signal, leave your thoughts in the comments, and tell us, if you had been in King Charles' position, would you have made the same decision?